The 40mm lens is one that has become quite popular in the last few years. The focal length isn't new or anything, there have been 40mm lenses around for decades. But I've begun to see a lot more people use a 40mm focal length just in the past like 2 or 3 years. And I would put this down to the focal length being as close as you can get to what you naturally see with the human eye, unless you go for something like a specialist piece of equipment like a Leica Q43, because that is exactly what the human eye sees, but it's only 3mm away from being a 40. While 35mm lenses and 50mm lenses are a lot more traditional for people to choose from, whether they are doing like portrait work, documentary work, or just everyday photography, a 40mm focal length is one that I see a lot of people pick nowadays to get that in between so they don't have to choose a 35mm or a 50mm. And I myself thought this would be a great solution for my work, since I primarily shoot with a 50mm or a 35mm. On the GFX that I had, it was the Nikon 65mm 1.4 to be my 50mm equivalent, and then it was also the Mamiya 45mm f2.8 for the Mamiya 645 that I basically just attached onto my GFX to be my 35mm equivalent. And then on my X-T4, which I'm shooting with right now, I'm shooting with a 23mm f2, which is a 35mm equivalent. By far, 35mm is my favourite focal length. It's just so perfect for a bunch of different things, but every now and again I would want a 50. So I thought a 40mm would be perfect for me, since you get all the good things from a 50mm and a 35mm, or so I thought at least. For me, whenever I was shooting a 50, I would want something a little bit wider, so I will go for a 35mm. But whenever I shoot a 35mm, I think this could do with a little bit more compression. So it would be a no-brainer to get a 40mm. It just seems perfect. And when I purchased my Nikon ZF, it came with the 40mm f2. And I was like, that's perfect for me, that is the lens that I wanted, everything's great. But I went out on a whim and also purchased the 28mm f2.8, since whenever I was doing landscape work with my 35mm equivalent lenses, I always thought they were a little bit tight, so I wanted to try a 28mm. And I completely thought that the 40mm would be on the camera 90% of the time, and then whenever I wanted something a little bit wider, I would go with the 28mm. But that was just completely wrong, and it was the other way around. I just fell in love with the 28mm, and I kind of disregarded the 40mm. While the 28mm hit that sweet spot of being perfect for landscape photography, it also was more than capable of taking some nice portraits as well. Whereas the 40mm just didn't really sit quite right with me. It was a very weird focal length, it's just too much of an in-between, and it felt a bit awkward to use. I found myself wanting a 35mm lens or a 50mm lens more times than I was happy with using this 40mm lens. It took me almost 2 months of shooting and owning the Nikon ZF to finally stop myself from putting this lens on the camera, shooting maybe 2 or 3 photos and then going, nah, I'm going to use the 28. It took 2 months to do that because of how much I didn't like this lens. But I finally done it, and I forced myself to use this 40mm lens for at least one shoot. That was in early March, and while the photos are okay, there are a few that I like, especially ones of my cat Scraggles, because that was not long before he passed away. After doing that shoot, I just came to the conclusion that I just didn't really like this lens, and I really didn't like the 40mm focal length. I was planning on selling this 40mm f2 by Nikon, but as time went on, more and more people told me about how amazing the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2 is. I even had some people say that they really didn't like this lens as well. They went out and took a risk and got the 40mm f1.2 by Voigtlander and just fell in love with that lens. I don't have the money to do that, so I was wondering, if I use the 40mm lens enough, will I begin to like it? Is it just a learning curve from the few times that I have used it and much preferred the 28mm? It took around another 2 months for me to even bother to actually try and use this lens. In that time, I was struggling a bit with my photography and just creativity in general, and I was just experimenting with my Helios 44-2 that I have adapted onto the ZF. So once I was done making that video and done using that lens, I thought it might be a good idea to, try and use this one. after however many months of owning it. But I eventually started using it at the start of June up until now, and now it's like a quarter way through August. You're going to be seeing this video a lot later since I need to get a lot of videos done because I'm actually moving house, so yeah. And while at the time of recording this video, I haven't taken loads of photos of this lens. I've only done 3 shoots and taken maybe a couple hundred photos, and I've got, you know, a decent amount of keepers to show you. But in that time, I have become pretty comfortable with this lens, and I've figured out how to use it to get the results that I like. And it's safe to say that my opinion on the 40mm focal length has changed. Anyway, the first shoot that I done with this lens was when I went to the beach with my partner Jen, and we just wanted to get some everyday, casual, just standard portraits. Wasn't doing anything special, just went to the beach and thought I'd take some photos there. And while it did take a bit of getting used to, I began to understand why people like this 40mm focal length, and specifically this Nikon 40mm f2. This lens is surprisingly sharp for its very simple design. The fall off into the bokeh is really flattering, and full body portraits with this lens have a quality that I just really like, but I can't exactly put my finger on it. Admittedly, this day wasn't exactly the best day to go shoot. The lighting was a bit inconsistent and would go from really harsh to really soft in a split second, but we made it work and I quite like the images. And I can see why people recommended the 40mm f1.2 to me, as it just seems like it would exaggerate the good parts of this 40mm f2. The separation would be a lot more dramatic, the fall off into the bokeh would be even better, and I can imagine that it's very good for environmental and full body portraits. Just holding this 40mm f2 makes me want to go and shoot environmental portraits, so I can imagine owning the 1.2 version would be even better. Like, I can imagine that would make me be out all the time asking unique and interesting people for portraits, you know, in workshops or, you know, with cars that they have, or just unique things about them. I think that that lens would just make me be out all the time. But the second shoot that I done with this focal length shows more of what I noticed with the first. Things like this lens is very good for full body portraits, especially when wide open. The separation is good and the fall off of the bokeh is very pleasing. I also did get more close-up shots on this shoot, as the close-ups that I got on the first shoot, I wasn't exactly confident with how I feel about them. And while these close-up portraits are nice, I definitely think the 40mm lens is more suited towards full body portraits. With the close-up images, you can sort of tell that it's a 40mm lens. It just feels a bit awkward. It doesn't feel like a 35, and it doesn't feel like a 50. It just feels like a mashup of both, but not in a good way. It's sort of like you take bad parts from both, or not necessarily bad parts, but you take average parts from both of those lenses and you get that sort of close-up image. But with a full body portrait, it sort of looks like a 50, but also has like more wideness like a 35, but in the best way possible. I really like how this looks with full body portraits. Full body portraits sort of just hide the awkwardness with this lens a lot more than it does with close-up portraits. I guess it solves my issue of wanting more compression in 35mm photos sometimes, but it doesn't really do it in a good way, and it's kind of difficult to explain. But if you have used a 40mm lens and you've done some close-up portraits, you may know what I'm on about. I could just be, you know, batshit crazy and just completely waffling here, but in my opinion, it kind of just makes them look worse than if you were to shoot them with either a 35 or a 50. I also got some more photos on this shoot just of random things when I was using it more like an everyday lens rather than a portrait lens, but I do definitely prefer using this lens like a portrait lens, as I don't think it's wide enough for everyday style images. For the third and final shoot that I'd done with this lens, I shot some portraits that I would class as being more of my style. I was shooting my friend Simon when we went out to shoot with his Graflex camera. I also made a video about this, so be sure to check that out. And if this video goes out at the time I'm planning it to, then that video would probably be at least 2 or 3 weeks old at this point, so be sure to check it out. Anyway, for this shoot, I stuck with full body portraits and half body portraits, as anytime I'd done close-ups, it just didn't hit the same as those full body or half body portraits. So I was snapping away, getting photos of Simon with his beast of a Graflex camera, and these are by far my favourite images that I've taken with this lens. This focal length just excels with full body portraits, and it really does make me want to get that 40mm f1.2. The sharpness, bokeh fall off and separation are all perks that this lens have that make it good for full body portraits, and I can imagine getting the 40mm f1.2 from Voigtlander would just make all of that better, except from maybe minus the sharpness, as I know that lens does tend to be a little bit soft when shooting at 1.2. And even though my opinion has changed about this lens, and I do think it's better than what I thought before, I'm still going to sell it. While the 40mm focal length does excel in full body portraits, I don't really like it with close-ups or landscapes or anything else, so this would literally just be a 40mm full body portrait lens, and I don't really want that. While this lens is meant to be more of a versatile focal length than a 35 and a 50, I find it to be the opposite, as a 50mm is amazing for full body portraits, amazing for half body portraits, and amazing for close-up portraits, whereas this is good for full body portraits. And the same goes with like a 35mm. I quite like 35mm with full body portraits. Half body portraits a little bit less so, but still decent, especially if you get like a 1.4 lens, and then a close-up with a 35mm, especially a 1.4 lens again, looks great. It really does. And you can also use a 35mm for some very nice landscape photography and just everyday things. But once again, this lens, I just think it's only really great for full body portraits. So even though it's meant to be more versatile, I just don't think that's the case. It's just too much of a situational lens for me, and while I do like its full body portraits, I'd much rather just have a 35 1.4 or a 50 1.4, because then they can still get those very nice full body portraits and more and be very happy with the results. So after this video is done, I'm going to pack this up and send it off, and the money that I get from it will be going straight towards either one of those 1.4 lenses. Anyway, that's the end of this video. I was really hoping that this 40mm lens would become part of my equipment that I use regularly, but unfortunately it hasn't. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.